Good morning, guys. It's Dan and Kai here again from Crescent Mortgages, coming to you one of our FAMQs.
Frequently asked mortgage questions.
And today we're going to be covering the topic of purchasing a buy-to-let through a limited company. Before we get started, as always, if you can like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're obviously doing our best to grow it. And any questions, leave them in the comments or contact us directly. Kai, why don't you kick things off?
Where do I start? It's something that's become more and more popular over the last 5, 6, 7 years mainly because of some tax and rule changes with buy-to-lets. And if you're watching this, then there's a good chance you're looking for answers on it. So often people purchase a limited company because there are big tax benefits. That in short. That is the big reason. Now,
we normally talk pros and cons, don't we? I mean, that's buying through a limited company. That's pretty much the main and only pro. That it can be, again, depending on your details, there can be big tax benefits.
And we probably have to also add in that we obviously aren't tax advisors, so we can't give you said advice on the tax itself. But it wouldn't surprise me if an accountant you've spoken to, maybe a friend who has properties,
tax advisor, IFA, whoever,
a lot of them will tell you, do it this way. And there are certainly many times when it can work, but there are a few things that people forget, I suppose.
Yeah, so you do have to weigh up we have people contact us that they're so caught up in the tax saving that they do forget about the potential cons. Now, we're not saying that it's a bad option. For some people, it is the right option, but you just need to make sure that you've weighed everything up. So I guess if we just jump into it then. So we've covered the pros, basically, the tax liability. Move on to the cons.
Well, the main con I would probably say, they kind of go hand in hand. So you're limited to lenders, your specialist lenders, 10, 15 maybe in the UK, maybe a few more, but
you're basically ruling out the high street, aren't you?
Yeah, you're at the majority of the high street. There are one or two kind of buy-to-let high street lenders, if that makes sense, which you maybe haven't heard of.
Bit of a hybrid.
Yeah, a little bit, I suppose. But they are in that space, and maybe lenders will get more and more in that space, and it will help. But you are going to be limited. You aren't going to get the stellar household names that might have therefore the best interest rates, I suppose, is the second knock-on effect.
Well, and I guess regardless of whether more high street lenders come into this market or not, generally if they do, they're going to have specialist products for purchases through a limited company. So moving on to the next point is that a limited company mortgage will be, I'd say pretty much every time, more expensive than a standard buy-to-let purchase or remortgage. So you're generally looking at higher interest rates and normally higher arrangement fees as well, and sometimes significantly higher.
Again, it's not unusual for these sorts of products and sorts of lenders have percentage arrangement fees, and that often
you do the math.
2.5%. So even on a small £100,000 mortgage,
nice easy one to
exactly, because I picked the easy one because I don't want to do this live. But you're going to get £2,000 to £2,500.
Could be more,
which is a pretty standard fee potentially.
That's not to say there aren't some that do have lower fees, but again, the ones with the lower fees possibly could have higher interest rates to kind of balance that out. Yeah,
it's quite rare you get fee-free. When you do, there's a big jump in the interest rate. It is more expensive lending, and if you can save a few grand on your tax bill, that is obviously an advantage. But if every 2 years you're remortgaging and paying a £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 arrangement fee, a much higher interest rate, it starts to unravel potentially.
So I guess the main point here is if you do speak to a tax advisor and you get a feel for how much tax you think you might be able to save, maybe on a yearly basis, if you buy through a limited company compared to just purchasing under your own name, once you've got an idea of how much you're going to be able to save, you can then start to look at the comparisons between a normal mortgage and a limited company mortgage and start to get a feel for whether financially it's going to be right for you. If it's significantly cheaper overall to go through the limited company, then obviously maybe that's the way to go. Although bear in mind again that you might be looking at kind of slightly more obscure lenders, maybe the process will be a bit slower. Usually you need to get independent legal advice, so the legal costs will be a bit more expensive as well. So these are all kind of factors to consider before you make a final decision. I guess a couple of points just to kind of bits of criteria just to keep an eye out for.
Kind of what 2-3 kind of key points.
SPV.
Yeah, SPV, so special purpose vehicle. So the company, that you set up has to be designed for property only, generally.
Not always, but
sometimes not, but
most
as a rule of thumb,
yeah.
If you can keep to that, you're going to keep those limited options at least open as wide as you can.
Just to give you a quick example there, if you're running, if you already run a limited company, let's say, you're an accountant, for example, you're running a limited company and you think, oh, actually, maybe I'll just purchase the new property through the limited company that I already own. Generally, that wouldn't be appropriate with most lenders because that isn't an SPV, that's a business set up for accountancy rather than for kind of purchasing and managing properties.
Definitely. And going hand in hand with that SPV, you would get your SIC, so SIC, if you will, code. There are 3 of them generally.
That are acceptable.
Yeah. And they, again, if you're setting up for property only, it's almost always one of those 3. If you want those information, they'll be in the bio down below, the 3 main SIC codes.
Good point. But again, some lenders are a bit more lenient. They might have a few more SIC codes that they can accept, but generally, there's a very short list of acceptable SIC codes of what the limited company is kind of registered in the way it trades.
The last bit would be about how they underwrite them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this is a bit of a kind of misconception, really, that that even though technically the limited company will own the new property, which is essentially how you're going to be saving tax. The mortgage application, although they will be looking at the details of the limited company, they will actually be assessing you, the directors of the limited company, when they assess the mortgage. So they may still have a minimum income. They'll run the credit check on you. So again, regardless of the status of the company, you personally would need to meet the credit check. Often they would require all directors of the limited company to be named on the mortgage. Again, because they want to know the details of each director rather than just the company.
Yeah, no, I think that's right as well. To try and summarise that a little bit, I would say if you're buying one property and that's it, you're buying this long-term pension plan, a lot of people don't end up buying through a limited company, although you can.
Especially if you're not a higher taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly. But once you start thinking, actually, I do want to buy 3, 4, 5, and beyond, it can sometimes be a bit more beneficial. So the more you buy sometimes becomes more beneficial, but it's so important to talk to someone and understand, right, if I don't do it through a limited company, what do I get? If I do it through a limited company, what do I get? From a mortgage perspective, so have your conversation with your accountant or whoever it is that's told you to do it anyway, and then you can weigh those 2 up.
Yeah, like I said, for some people, yes, it is definitely the right option, as long as you the figures that you're looking at, and it can save you potentially a significant amount of money. But it's not for everyone. It's definitely not for everyone. So you need to factor in all of the kind of the details before you make your final decision. Any questions? Obviously, get in contact. We do have a link in the bio to come over to our website or give us a call. If you've purchased through a limited company or thinking about purchasing through a limited company, obviously feel free to leave us some feedback in the comments, and we'll do our best to come back to you and hopefully hear from you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.